Minnesota Vikings fans, welcome back to the Purple People Eaters podcast. He's Aaron, I'm Chris, and we're here to talk about some Minnesota Vikings football. Now, obviously, we're going to spend the whole time breaking down this Bears game because I liked what I saw, and I think it's going to carry over till – okay, I'll stop, okay? I mean, don't get me wrong, I liked a couple of things I saw. But we are not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. The obvious, elephant in the room, or elephants, I should say, Zimmer and Spielman got the axe. And they're done now. They are long gone. So, what do we do from here? You know, if you listen to the media or part-time media or in your Facebook Vikings group, boy, sometimes you'll hear some ridiculous stuff like, trade the top 8 players except Jefferson. But these are the same people that'll say Jefferson's not going to want to stay here for some reason, right? Because Zimmer's too defensive or because obviously he doesn't like Kirk Cousins, But you really think Jefferson's going to want to stay here? If you think he's going to demand a trade, do you think once you blow up the whole roster and he's playing with guys younger than him and he's in his second year, leaving as a junior, you think that's going to keep him here? Okay, sure. We got the double dip today, bright and early in the morning. We'll have a little fallout, review our thoughts on the firing. It is harder, to see where they're going to go GM-wise just because it's tough to see not tough, but you don't really spend a lot of time, researching, or at least I should say, researching the second and third and fourth, fifth highest ranked in each franchise and all that. We have a little bit, longer of a list as far as head coach, who will be the head coach if they didn't make it sound like, which kind of makes sense. You're going to hire the GM first. And you're going to start looking for coaches and do all that stuff, but you're going to go GM first, which makes a lot of sense. And then a lot of people shading towards an offensive coach has to be an offensive mind. I do get that, but you don't want to pigeonhole yourself and limit yourself, and just say there's no way we could hire a defensive coordinator as a head coach. You don't want to do that, but I do get it. So we're going to talk it through. We do have some decisions coming up, a bunch of them. 2 of them were made today. It just in this off season, obviously, the Kirk Cousins cap hit. Danielle Hunter, where's he at after missing 2 years, from injury? And if you look at the last 3 out of 5 years, I believe it's been injured. What do you do with that? He's got a big cap hit. Do you extend him? Do you trade him? There's a lot that goes into this year. The cap number as it sits is not ideal, but as we know, cap numbers can be maneuvered. It is real. I'm not going to say, cap numbers, it's just a number, dude. It's not real. No, it is just a number, as we saw cap health from last year, that it was just a number. But we do have some things we got to tweak in order to get it, whether it's trade or extend. So we're going to talk it through. Yeah, we'll cover a little bit of the Bears stuff, but we're not going to get too deep into that one. But yeah, there's a lot of questions out there, man. There's a lot of questions that we're going to talk about on today's show. If this is your first time listening to the Purple People Eaters podcast, welcome. It's available in a variety of ways. You can find this here Vikings podcast on blogtalkradio.com/rope-it-over radio. You don't have to go to Blog Talk and rope it open. Download the show directly there. Listen to the browser. You can find this here Viking show on the Rope It Over Radio podcast under Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Player FM, TuneIn, Amazon Music. We're also part of the Grueling Chew Sports Podcast Network. While you're at it, why don't you head on over to thegruelingchew.com. And we also have a Spreaker page. It's called Living in Loserville. Spreaker page. Aaron set it up last year sometime. Of course, you'll have the Vikings stuff. We're about to transition into the Timberwolves Gophers, season, which we call that Living in Loserville. And he also has some podcasts you might like that he does personally. So it's called Living in Loserville, Spricker. One more thing. If you're thinking about cutting the cord or you're not quite happy, I got something for you. It's called DirecTV Stream. The prices start as low as $69.99 a month. It's the best of live TV and on demand. No annual contracts, no hidden fees. If you upgrade to the Choice or Ultimate package, that'll give you 3 free months of HBO Max, plus you get to enjoy regional sports networks with no additional fees, which you see that is becoming a major problem. If you go all the way up to the Premier package, that'll give you HBO Max and Showtime already included in the monthly fee. That's DirecTV Stream. Okay, let's go ahead and bring in Aaron and get his thoughts on, the firing, the axing of both the GM, president, whatever, operational guy, and then, of course, Mike Zimmer.
Well, we talked a little bit about it last week, Chris. We didn't know what direction the Wilfs would go as far as, one, letting go of Zimmer, and then additionally letting go of Rick Spielman as well. I thought that was the only move to make, but that, of course, was only my opinion. And just because I thought you and I just had discussed the new eyes approach, a lot of players that, might not make other rosters seem to find great homes here. And it just maybe needed to be a clean wash. I'm glad it worked out that way, but I wasn't 100% confident that it was going to. So when I woke up this morning and I saw the Vikings press release, I was pleasantly surprised that both were let go. Now, I don't say that in a way to dance on the grave of either Spielman or Zimmer, because I used to be a Spielman guy back in the day a little bit more than I am now, but I was definitely still a Zimmer guy, and I just think, a lot of things went into the performance of his team, but I thought, as far as him being a defensive coordinator and a head coach, I thought he did a decent to pretty good job. So I don't want to, dance on their graves at all, but I'm glad that the changes were made, and I'm glad to see that it was a full change. And that just brings new issues and an exciting offseason that we're going to have to get into a little bit here. Cap hell is already being put out there, and every year it seems that we're in cap hell, and every year it seems to work out. So I'm not sure that there is a such thing as cap hell. We'll get into a little bit of that later. But yeah, this offseason is going to be something, and I think it all begins with hiring a GM.
Yeah, they did make that clear today that they are going to go for a GM first. Doesn't mean they can't, have some interviews and continue to do some of the work they're probably doing behind the scenes the last few weeks. And it can take a little less longer to get this one out of the way. They probably have their eyes on a handful of folks. We'll see where it goes there. Like I said, the advice there, it's tough, that George Patton dude, who was in Minnesota from like 2007 till last year, that would have been the one that we probably assume, we would bump him up, but he did last year take the Broncos GM. So that's obviously not going to be there. There was some talks, and actually Charles Robinson today did, have a tweet saying that multiple sources believed as recently as early December that Rick Spielman was on track to promotions in the Vikings org. It says to have a senior position that would have placed him between the GM coach layer and the ownership. He says apparently some of the Zimmer fallout changed the roadmap. There was more than just that tweet. There was rumors about maybe this first year, or maybe moving on, he'll go back to the role he was in previously before they made him fully in charge, which that has its pros and cons. The pro would be, well, he doesn't have the final decision. And the transition, when someone come in new, okay, this is what we got. Now, that's not to say that Spielman just sat in a room all by himself and didn't tell anyone his plans. So there are people there, hey, this is what we're thinking with this player, with that contract, with this, how we want to do that. So I was wondering if that could happen. I did think Spielman would be, released from his duties his current duties. But I was wondering about that part. I did think maybe somehow, some way, advisory role, that he could maybe hang out that way. Which, like I said, there's pros and cons. You don't really necessarily, I don't know. He's had his time. He's been here since 2006, in some form or fashion. So, it is what it is. There's a lot of questions, like I said, with the roster, with this, with that. But as far as talking about the next head coach, since we're not going to go over this long list because I don't have a long list of GMs. So talking about the coach, though, you hear people kind of hell-bent, stuck one way and say it has to be not just an offensive-minded coach or an offensive coordinator, but a young one at that. And we have seen some recent successes, no doubt about it. Even the Arizona coach, who's had some success this year, didn't have a whole lot of success at Texas Tech. And so that kind of was like, damn, so he failed at a college in the Big 12 that's offensive oriented, really didn't have a good year, and he still got a head coaching, but that kind of shows you the fact that they're more flexible to different types of offenses, which have helped college quarterbacks come in, and some of them, because remember, it was just, we need a pocket passer. That's all we need. That's what it used to be. And you can see just the amount of passing that goes on now. I get that part. And I do shade offensive coordinator. But, Aaron, you don't want to make a mistake of just, well, we got the fourth best offensive coordinator when there may have been a better, available guy. Just because he's a D coordinator doesn't mean he can't go out and get a pretty damn good quality offensive coordinator. Where do you stand with that? Because it's just so hell-bent to young and offensive coordinator.
Yeah, well, let me put away my long list of GM candidates here.
We'll save it. We'll have a special episode.
Sure. About 20 names deep. No, so, we talked a little bit, Chris, earlier, but without the GM in place, it's hard to really say, what direction you're going to go. And this all happened this morning, so it's fresh for all of us. And, I do shade a little bit like you to the offensive side of the ball because we're really stacked offensively in the skill positions. You want somebody who can drive that car, so to speak. But it also has to be somebody who realizes that car right now is on bad suspension and it doesn't have good tires on it, and we need to fix the offensive line fast. And so, I think anybody with any acumen at their job will realize that. But, like you said, you don't want to end up with the last person in their class just because they're an offensive mind, so to speak. And if you find a shining example of a fine offensive mind, I don't care if he's 90 or if he's 35. That doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that, they're bringing something innovative and are willing to, maybe use that, to do their job. But to me, it's like I really don't see a big difference. If you either get a great defensive guy or an offensive guy, I'm not stuck on no, we had a defensive coordinator. We had Mike Zimmer. Okay. Mike Zimmer is an entity unto himself, and another defensive coordinator is not going to be exactly like Mike Zimmer, obviously, and have different ways of doing things. So, I guess I don't really shade any way, as long as it's somebody that I see that has a, good football mind, I guess, quote unquote, and is able to do the job. There's a couple candidates that I've already kind of said to you that I liked, but I don't know much about them either and what they hire, what they have to offer. And like you said about Kingsbury, nobody could have seen that coming. He didn't do very well in college football, and usually coaches coming from college football don't do great in the NFL. And you have an anomaly there. So do you roll your dice on maybe a college coach? Yeah, I wouldn't be so happy about that. But then again, I don't want to retread from an NFL coach either. So, it's very hard to kind of put your finger on what you want here. But the offensive talent here is undeniable. And I think some of the defensive parts are undeniable. So, long story shorter, to answer your question, just a good coach and somebody that has promise. And I guess I would prefer maybe someone younger, but the best coach available is what I'm after, and hopefully you can get him off somebody's staff or you've got feelers out there already. I just find it hard to believe, Chris, that the Wolves would make a move and get rid of both of them without having at least a few GM candidates in mind.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that would be, and they could have maybe kept old Ricky Boy, for a year or two, or maybe long term if that was the case, if they didn't feel prepared or whatever. I guess we'll find out there. But yeah, I tend to agree with you there. The Kellen Moore, the Byron Leftwich. I mean, there's a couple of young guns that look good on paper. Like you said, you don't know until they actually have to talk to the whole team and not just talk, but motivate and all that good stuff. It does kind of a knee jerk, but kind of makes sense too. Like if we do get a young head coach, then I kind of want to have a veteran D coordinator to where it's kind of the opposite of Zimmer. Not coordinator, but the fact that, the best time with Zimmer was when it was most of the time a veteran guy, or at least, Stefanski was young, but he was here for a while. So it's like he could just kind of trust the guy to do him. Okay, you handle offense, I got the defense. Where, if we had a young offense guy, well, he's playing, he's going to do the play call more than likely. And so I'd like him to be able to just not have to overly spend his time on that side. And sometimes these guys are kind of like specialists like that. So where they're just like, hey, dude, I got this down pat. We'll see from there. And obviously younger can be better nowadays. They're more open to, expanding the playbook or tweaking it. And, obviously relatable to the players too, which can mean something, no doubt about it. If you're winning, however you win, you get away with it. Once you start losing, like these last couple of years, then all of a sudden people are like, oh man, Zimmer is grouchy. Oh man, he's a cold-blooded guy. It's like, you haven't noticed that this whole freaking time? What are you talking about? You were complaining about it before. But yeah, I mean, I like what you said about you can't sit there and, we don't want the fourth or fifth best coordinator just to get a coordinator. But I find it hard to fathom that this isn't a top tier offensive place to land just with the talent we got. And like you mentioned as well, it's not the defensive stats these last 2 years suck, most of them, but we know what that entails. There's reasons, there's excuses, right? We know that, but there are a lot of reasons here too why this defense wasn't even middle of the pack. We had some crazy injuries, yada, yada, yada. But, kind of moving forward with this, talking about the roster, we're not going to break down the whole roster, but a lot of people, and this is not just fans, this is media too, especially the part-time media, but sometimes they just want to, complete full rebuild, dude. Just look at your top 7 players and get rid of them all. And I think that's just silly. It's so hard to build a core, In 2 years, will Kendricks maybe be a different player because he's older? Yes. But 2 years is a long time. 2 to 3 years is a whole long time in NFL football. It really is. And some of these contracts, even like a Harrison Smith, I see people say, I'd probably just get rid of him or cut him. It's like, well, you're not going to cut him because you just extended him. So I have said all along that this is not this major rebuild, okay? This is a pretty quality, plenty of core guys that still have a few years left. And, Mark Wilf said, we feel like we can be super competitive in 2022. And just based off, if we could just have Pierce and Hunter on the same field together for 15 or 14 out of the 17 games, that could make a difference right there. So there's no point in blowing this whole thing up unless blow it up meant what happened today.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, I think it's more of a trim the fat sort of situation where, you keep your core because it's a talented core and it's fairly young. I mean, you're going to probably lose Barr. But Kendricks isn't under contract and is in the prime of his career. Harrison Smith's winding down his career, but still part of that core. Defensively, yeah, Pat P's got to make his decision, whether he's going to stay or go, but, I think the coach probably has a lot to do with that as well. And you have, offensive side of the ball, everybody's under contract that needs to be. And talking about whether this is a good job to come into, it certainly is with the new, practice facility, the new stadium. You do have a quarterback in place right now. We'll get onto that later. And you have great skill position players. Dalvin Cook's top 5 running back, maybe higher than that. And, Jefferson, Thielen, the emergence of Smith Marset yesterday, and, KJ Osborne. You've got depth there. So it's a great place. Obviously, offensive line is something. Irv Smith will return. And then Danielle Hunter also, back on that defense. So you've got the players. And the full rebuild thing is, that's pie in the sky. You got too many guys under contract. But some of that depth that needs to get washed out, guys that are just not doing anything for you or that still remain need to be dealt with. So I'd say, yeah, just kind of trim the fat on the roster, maybe organize it a little bit better, and bring in some new talent that you think can help you. I think that's basically what we're looking at here. And then, this will be these guys' 4th offensive coordinator in 4 years. Yeah, some say it's the same system, but these guys have just been, every training camp has just been a relearning or a re-getting to know or something. There hasn't been a lot of stability there. And that's something you'd like to see. Now, obviously, this year it's going to be another change, but you'd like to see something be a little bit more stable in that department. And, Chicago's got a nice thing too, because they got Fields, and what can you do with him? So, I mean, that's an appealing job too. But, I think we're right up at the top of the list for appealing jobs for candidates for both GM and coach. So I don't think it's going to be a problem of trying to get someone to work to do the job. I just think, like you pointed out with that question, is what is the job actually? Are we looking for, are you going to try to trade some guys to get some draft picks because you want to go in a new direction? Are we going to go to a 3-4 defense and we need new players? I mean, questions like that kind of tend to arise. And, you've got guys that can play a 3-4 or whatever it is, but, you're going to have to do some, I don't want to call it a retool because I think it's like a step under that, Chris. I think it's just
I think
evaluate talent and make the appropriate decision type of thing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. If we change it to 3-4, Barr may come back. No, yeah, you're right. And right now, as far as the interior defensive line, we're good either way. If you look at who we got, we could go 3-4 just as easily as we go 4-3. So of course we need more linebackers in that case, right? But or you never know. Maybe Jones, one of these younger guys, maybe they would kind of go into one of those, linebackers. That could be too. But I guess that's where shading to the offensive side, that maybe that's when we talk about the coordinator every year. Every successful coordinator that Zimmer had went on either, obviously retirement. The old man Kubiak had a damn good year, but then the 2 prior, they got head coaches. So you can't really, he obviously signed the right guy, but it was 2 right, I guess, but that would be the stability there, Aaron, right? If you did get an offensive coach, because he's going to be there for, at least probably 3 years. So that would be helpful because you're right. Cook, I think, what's his 5th or 6th year? He said every year. And then Cousins too, even dating back to Washington. I mean, that is kind of the trend. The money's so good, the opportunity's there that, if you do good, you're going to get there. And sometimes that's if you have a younger guy, somewhat inexperienced, but with a lot of potential, it helps. You can maybe keep him for a couple more years. Of course, that's what you could make the argument for this Kubiak too, right? But it is what it is when it comes to that. But yeah, you make a lot of good points there, and we do have to see which direction they go with the roster. As far as the top 2 numbers on the cap, clearly the $45 million, which that number, if it's traded or changed, it's going to be so funny think about how many clicks and listens and tweets and retweets and likes that fucking thing got. I mean, kudos to them. I mean, talk about just rumming up some shit. That would be funny. That would be probably just as bad as the Capel theme that we had to hear for a year and a half, the narrative there, which was obviously bullshit. But you got to do what you got to do. I get it. I don't have to like it, but I get it. But the top two, 45 straight up, and then $26 million for Hunter. And obviously, we'll start with Hunter first. It's a weird situation. He's got 2 years left on his deal. We tweaked it. We tweaked last year's money for him, even though he wasn't playing, just to, kind of say, hey, dude, you do deserve some more money. We get it. But we do have to see you on the field, so then we feel better about extending you. Well, obviously, we saw he was a stud, but about week 5, week 6, unfortunately, he tore a pec muscle. So that's back-to-back years. 1 year didn't play at all and played a small chunk this year. And then when you back it up, he had those 2 great years. But then remember, and this actually was when he signed his contract, his extension, he messed up his pec then. And I can't remember if it was the same pec. I hope not. But that's 3 out of 5 years of missing pretty significant time. So leverage is not on his side. However, if he were to play about, let's say, 14, 15 games this next year, it'd be phenomenal, one, as a fan, right? But also, that 9-something, it's below $10 million next year, that would obviously, we'd have to do something there. Otherwise, that whole thing that people thought this year he wouldn't show up, well, I don't think he'd show up next year. Nor would I think he should if he just came off a solid year, 10-plus sacks, just his normal thing. He wouldn't be getting paid like that. So, people will knee-jerk Aaron right away. I'm like, oh, what are you doing? What are you talking about? But I think there's, with both these guys, Cousins and Hunter, the trade or extend. And extending, obviously, in the coming years would have to really focus on him making the roster, meaning he's healthy. We can't give him all this extra money for 3 years to come, and then he gets hurt again. That's 3 straight years he's hurt. Then we're screwed. At the same time, if he hits, he's still going to be valuable next year to trade him. Someone would just extend him. And if he made it through the year, he'd be more valuable to trade. So you could either extend or trade next year. There is a debate for that. But I kind of feel like we should extend him as long as it's hidden in that roster signing Ziggy money. Like, hey, if you make it by this date, you're still on the roster 5 days into the new year or whatever, or that June 1st date that we like to talk about a lot. Then I'm okay with that. And I think we could cut 5 or 10 or, $7 million or something off of his cap number this year. And then we're all happy because normally I wouldn't do this, but he's just, he was the first to 50 at 25. Like, he's just such a special player that I don't want to give up on him just yet and trade him.
Yeah, you brushed upon it. The interesting thing about him is that he's still young. I mean, his playing years, I think he came into the league at 19, 20, something like that.
Well, no. He was 21.
21 or something?
Yeah, he can't come in the league at that age.
And he, entering his prime, and let's say he does heal up from the pec, and the neck seems to be a non-issue at this point. A pec is something you can deal with. He's got plenty of time to rehab it. Now, my concern here, I guess I'm not really concerned. I guess if you're a Danielle Hunter fan, it's a concern, is that it's a contract that's kind of prime for trading at this point in time. And the situation with his injuries, like you said, kind of takes a little leverage away from him. But I could see something like a draft day move or something to acquire some picks if you're going in a different direction scheme-wise or something like that. Now, I would love to see Danielle be a lifelong Viking. That's number one priority. And in that case, I would want to see an extension, of course, maybe a restructure and an extension. But I could see a new GM saying, well, this is a prime piece. We could move. We're not 100% on him due to his injury stuff. He's a talented player. He's young enough. You could get pretty good value for him. He plays a position that's high demand. But then you find yourself looking for a replacement of a all-pro, possibly Hall of Fame defensive end And I just don't think, long term that's probably the best move. I think you're probably right on that. Is you ride it out with him because, like you said, he's young for his years. He's phenomenally talented, and he just got banged up a couple of seasons, which is good in a sense that he doesn't have all that wear on his tire, and he can, possibly be productive for you for another 8 to 10 years. I think that's probably what you have to side on if you are thinking long-term wise. But if you're thinking short-term, patch holes, fix things, I think it's a pretty nice trade piece. And I, like I said, I would hate to see him go, but I could see that happening.
Sure. Yeah, and it would free up some money there to possibly that in the draft to possibly replace his snaps. We'll put it that way. We won't say replace him, but replace his snaps because someone's got to do it. Like you said, that's a good point. And those first, especially the first year, but I believe in the second year too. He was coming off the bench, much like Everson Griffin. Now he came in, and it didn't take him 5 years to blow up. But we had Robertson and we had Allen, so it was like it did take him like 2 years to really be able to be a hands down number one guy. So to your point, it does save on those legs and body. And think about if he can remain healthy somewhat, that is a lot of legs wear and tear that didn't happen these last years. That's a very good point. And that actually does bode well for longevity. I think that even if you extended him at the end of next year, I think that's when you make the decision on the trade. Now, given if he got hurt again, then his trade value would diminish even further. But right now, it's somewhat diminished. But I just think at some point he'd hold out and we'd end up probably cutting him or something too. I don't know. It's a weird thing because damn well that someone's gonna pay him $20 million plus a year and just say screw it, let's try 1-2 years on it. Who cares if he ever hit the market? Now Kirk Cousins is obviously in the same boat for different reasons. We chose to just do a 2-year extension after the 2019 instead of a longer one. And I know that would have been sacrilegious to a lot of people if an extra year or two. Oh my God, what would we do that for? But this is the reason why we do it because we wouldn't be staring at this goddamn $45 million. But anyway, I digress. When we're talking about this emotional, hot button topic, I'll say this: there's very few guys that I'll just like, when a guy gets old and you're like, dude, he's still got another year left. And, I think everyone's fallen victim a little bit to that. Like, no, let's just hold on, dude. We can't trade him or we can't cut him. And, I get that part, but I always want to improve the team. Team is first, even though it doesn't feel like that on Vikings Twitter sometimes, it should be team first at the end of the day. Because we're not making these goddamn decisions anyway. So why would we get so, you know what I mean? That's what makes me laugh. So I'm down to improve my team. Now, we're going to go over all this free agency and stuff before March 16th or whatever. We'll have our free agency preview show and all that. So we're not going to get too detailed, but it doesn't take long to see that there are some pretty good veteran cornerbacks that are on the market. And funny enough, 2 years ago, they would have been like $20 million. Now they're not, some of them, per year, for your deal, even if it's a 1-year deal. So some of them actually have taken pay cuts, so it's helped us that way if you want to go the route of drafting a quarterback and going the vet route, right? So there's the route of trading him, getting $35 million to spend. At that point, you'd have to get a center and a guard. If you got that kind of money, like fuck, you'd have to do that. Because one, you're going to get a young player. You don't want him getting fucking killed. And two, you're going to get an old veteran dude who probably moves less than Cousins or is limited. I mean, everybody on, whether they're too old, like maybe a Phillip Rivers or something like that, or somebody there, Teddy, and, all these names, Jameis, Winston, all that. Cousins is better than those guys, but you'd have to improve the offensive line interior majorly to because then you'd have some success regardless. So there's that route, or you cut what could be 10, what could be 15, some even say maybe 20 this first year off of this current cap, and then you extend them for the next few years, and it gives the coach, the GM, 2 to 3 years from now. And a lot of these guys that we talk about are that 2 to 4 year range that are the core. So it's actually lines up pretty well either way you do it. To me, it's like, I think you could do it next year and the year after that too, trade him. If you did get someone that's really good and you feel good about him after a year or something like that. But even if you draft someone, it's either a vet with a better line, or you extend Cousins and you could still have a better line because you would literally free up an estimation of 10 to 20 million on this year's cap by extending him. What's your gut saying we should do, sir?
Well, you brought up a lot of different scenarios there. A lot of them I hadn't thought about, particularly the one about, the GM coming in and giving him a little bit of breathing room to make a quarterback decision. I think makes a heck of a lot of sense. And, we all have our feelings on Cousins, Vikings fans. Some love him, some hate him, some in between, but very few in between. And I think that, knowing what we know now with the changes at GM and coach, and looking for any kind of stability offensively through that position, as much as it pains me to say, I think you find a way to try to get that cap number down and keep him for at least another year. Now, Kirk's going to have his say in this as well. So we don't know where he stands on virtually anything in life, but
well, he likes God. We know that. And two, he did say he wanted to be a Vikings. He wants to retire here, so
And we know he likes money, so we know the money is priority number one. It appears after God, so that would be priority number 2 for Kirk Cousins. So getting him to cut his number.
But he likes freedoms a lot too, though. So that might be second, third. I don't know.
But getting him to take a cut of any kind, Chris, to me seems like a tall ask. So I think you're stuck with either the 45 or no Cousins. And that's the decision the new GM is going to have to make.
What do you mean by that? 45 or no Cousins? Like, you don't think he'd be willing to?
No.
Well, an extend would bring it down.
An extend would bring it down, but as far as
him just
stretch
chopping
it out.
Yeah,
right.
Him just chopping this. You could stay on your 1-year deal, but you just chop it down.
Yeah, or somehow he loses money in an extension. Like, Kirk Cousins is not going to lose money. So you're either going to spread it out or you're going to pay it all right away. Yeah. And if you had something, let's say you got a great pick or a quarterback falls into your lap or something in the draft or that you think is promising, then, you make a little different decision. But, then you go back to the roster construction. Can you get 2 guards in a center with his cap hit this year? And if he's unwilling to extend, probably not unless you draft really well.
That would be impossible, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah, they're close.
So, you have to put that offensive, like you said, offensively, if you do fill those spots on the offensive line, you're going to be successful to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
But, not as probably successful as to have, someone like Cousins, a good offensive line, and the rest of those offensive parts. That's a recipe for a lot of success. So I think it kind of stands on what Kirk wants to do, but I think let's say Kirk just stands by his guns and he just says, look, pay me. If that was the case, I would look to trade him and see what's out there. I'm not going to just give him away. Right. I would look to get rid of him in a trade for value. I'm not getting rid of him just to get rid of him. You give me an offer that I can live with, then
sure.
Yeah, I would definitely do the trade. Other than that, I would find a way to extend with an out clause somehow, trade clause or something to where you can move on a year or 2 later and not, suffer the huge cap hit that you would take this year. If you can find a rookie quarterback that's good and you can redo your roster, that's fine. But, this stuff you hear on Twitter and Facebook, just cut him and move on. That's not going to work. It's just not going to work. So, so I guess, number one, I would look to trade him. Number two, I would look to extend. That would be where I would stand. But I would not trade him for nothing. You're going to have to give me value for him, or I'll just keep him and we'll try to work something out and extend. That's where I stand on it. But you're right. Team first wise, and with the other changes, Cousins would be really the only stable piece back. And that also says something, so you can't, do you want to lose, GM, head coach, and starting quarterback in the same season and try to go from there? That's tough, but I can't say they won't go in that direction, but I don't think that's the best way to go. I think so. An extension likely, I think, was what will happen, and let's hope Kirk is agreeable to something like that so we can maybe try to get him an offensive line.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's made it known that he wants to be here, so that would have to be an extension, right? He already did an extension before. It is up to what they want to spend the money on. Clearly, it wouldn't move $35 million off the cap, and that's what I'm saying. You could get a legit center in guard at those prices, or just a stud center and then like a veteran guard. I'm not saying both top on the market, because that's like 15 to 20 million. So you wouldn't do that, but you'd be able to, do a little more. But then again, if you could get 15 or 20, you could still do some of that damage, along with the other tweaks we're going to do. But I would do the first option would be extend them, because knock on wood, the dude doesn't get fucking hurt. And with a better line, there's a better chance he'll continue that streak. And he's even weathered the Minnesota jinx. I mean, Pat P hadn't missed a couple of games in a row. We've seen the track record of guys coming here. Yeah, but 4 years in a row, he started 60 games and all this stuff. Even Cousins somehow has, that's the whole God-fearing thing, I think. But I would extend them, free up money now. And then obviously if you do both Hunter and him, that could be $25, $30 million, 20 to 30, whatever you want to say. So I would definitely do that. And then see what you got, because he's always tradable. They always say, there was 4 teams looking at him this year, as a trade thing. So if people say, oh, he's untradeable, just like, Wiggins is untradeable, right? That's what the local media told us for a year and a half or whatever. But obviously, I would have a different mentality, Aaron, if we had drafted one of 2 quarterbacks last year, right? Now I'd have a different viewpoint, because I'd be like, well, dude got his, 1 year in. If we invest even a little heavier than we would keeping Cousins on the offensive line, of course, then I probably go that route, because you say, all right, they've had a year to chill. Even Mahomes took a year to chill. Shit, Rodgers took 3 years, Then I'd have a different mentality. But I think the flexibility is there because he's tradable. So we'll see how that goes. Any last words or any kind of thoughts on that topic?
No, I mean, I hate to change it's my viewpoint on it, Chris, has changed in the last 24 hours just due to the other changes that were made. It's like, well, you want some continuity, Chris, in your offense, and he's unfortunately or fortunately the one piece that will or could be a bit of continuity, but at a very, very high price. And it's like,
well, potential.
I'm a little bit skeptical of Cousins agreeing to an extension. Now, you said, he said he wanted to be here for an extended period of time, and that's a good thing. But he's also really, I hate to say, good with his money, and he knows what the hell's going on. His agents are tough, and he got a guaranteed contract out of us. And maybe he's not dealing with Rick anymore, but he's got a lot of leverage on his side.
Well, he did the first time, the first time.
Yeah.
And he's already extended. That's what makes me think he would do it again, because he's already proven he would extend.
And he's also part of the main attraction for a head coach or for a GM that you have him in place. So
that's another layer. That's a very important layer. Good call.
And that's like a rock and a hard place. You're going to either pay up this $45 million and just kind of swallow that jagged pill this season.
I wouldn't do that.
Or you're going to have to do something about it. And that kind of depends on Cousins. If you won't budge and you owe him $45 million, you might have to make a choice that you don't necessarily want to make.
Well, you just trade him at that point.
Yeah, but then again, obviously, but then you would also not have the stability of a starting quarterback for the new GM or the new head coach.
Right. He literally extended 2 years ago. I think people are kind of thinking, and I'm not saying you're one of them, but because last year he wouldn't extend, well, how many players extend every year? Name me it. Now, we're not talking about the NBA because they have those 1s and 2s and all that weird contract. But in the NFL, you rarely see people extend their contract every single year.
Well, I think we'll find out if we hold him to his word that he wants to stay here, he will extend because it's in the best interest of the team and the franchise.
It's probably he's going to do a lot of praying on the scenario, I think, and then we'll get
he will
get a better judge of that. So, just to talk a little Bear stuff, I gotta say there was 2 plays where the record was in touch or right there for Jefferson. Now, he even said it too that, yeah, I wanted the record, but going into the week, he was like, well, I mean, it's a record, but it's a long-standing record and I'm getting an extra game, so I'm not necessarily on the Zimmer. I don't, like a lot of people were ripping him, and he said, I don't care about records. He said that 100 times in press conferences, so I expect that from him. He doesn't give a shit about records or numbers, maybe efficiency numbers and stuff like that, offensive, defense, but the 2 plays stood out, but I would we'll talk about one because it's the Cousins thing that people like to use that. But also the last play, or not the last play, but the last available play on that 3rd down when we chose to run it on 3rd and 10. That was funky because then you're right there. Just throw it 20 yards to see what happens. Now, I understand to use Edwards, Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. And it is true. I mean, if you forced it in triple coverage and they got a pick 6 and there's 6 minutes left or 5 minutes left, it's a 7-point game. Boy, would they love to rip them for that, too. You don't go chasing records. What are you doing, Mike? That's why you're getting fired. So, I would have liked to seen it there. A lot of people will talk about the touchdown that went to Osborne instead of Jefferson, but we've seen about 6 or 8 weeks where they all go towards Jefferson in that scenario, especially with Thielen's been out, obviously. And he guessed that they'd all go that way. And when you look at the slow motion, you see where the ball was. 2 of them ran towards where the ball was going already. So he wasn't as wide open right away as people thought. But it was funny to see one guy in the middle, like, I don't know what to do. He was stuck, which we're going to see a lot of that with Jefferson because you don't know what to do with this ass. You're like, oh, gee, someone help me. That's what I do know. But he went the Osborne way just assuming that they would do what they've done the last 6 weeks in the red zone. We've seen some wide open guys in there. So I don't really blame Cousins for that one because it's a bang-bang play. And like I said, I've slowed down the replay where he broke wide open. The ball was technically in the air already. So there were some guys running once he threw the ball. But I was not surprised because of Zimmer or Kubiak, whatever. But I would have liked to seen that third down try at the end of the game. What says you, sir?
Well, 2 ways of looking at it, I guess. The Herm Edwards approach, you play to win the game. Zimmer could have made the call, just run the frickin' ball or whatever it is, eat the clock and whatever it was. And then there's, the player side friendly of let's try to get Justin the record, to try to get something good out of this miserable season. That one didn't bother me much. I wasn't too concerned about whether Jefferson got the record or not. I like Moss holding records. He's a guy that needs to hold records, but
I'd have to agree with that.
But the other play, I did notice it actually in live action. I was like, oh, wow, Jefferson just broke open. And I did look at it again. You're right. The ball was in the air. And you're right. For the last few weeks, there's been free touchdowns because everybody's been on Jefferson, especially with Thielen out. It just kind of goes that way. So I don't blame Kurt just assuming that Jefferson's going to get some attention. And just the fact that he didn't, well, that's shocking, but not something you can rely on. You're not going to hang your hat on that. So I think he made the right play to the right thing. Now, would it have been a different, scenario had Jefferson broken open and KJ dropped the ball or it was a bad pass or something? Yeah, but no, it was a good pass. KJ caught it. It's a touchdown either way. What's the big deal except for the record? And I don't think, Kirk was trying to stick it to Justin or anything like that. But, I see him open, but I'm going to throw into somewhat double coverage just because I don't want to, that's insane.
Let's not get the young kid too high on himself. We got to humble him a little bit. I don't think that was
right. Or let's, he already got a touchdown. Let's get it to KJ and get him one. I just don't see anything like that. I just think it was bang bang play. Yeah. You got to go 9 out of 10 times. Jefferson's going to get the double and the safety. So you're going to go to Osborne on that. It would have been nice because it would have got, Justin the record, but it is what it is. It's a touchdown either way. So there's not much to complain about. But at the end of the game, Chris, I guess it would have been nice to throw the ball 3rd and 10, give it a shot. As long as you don't throw a pick six, you're fine. So, yeah. But then again, I don't think it was Zimmer saying, well, screw Jefferson. Let's just, run the ball. I think it's just, let's finish this game out, end on a good note, blah, blah, blah. And, that's how it went down. And I'm sorry, Justin had the extra game and, Randy deserves the record.
Yeah, and really, if we want to get technical, what about the 12-game guys? Shit. I mean, those guys got 4 more games to set records. It's pretty crazy when you think of that, when you look at when it was in New England, when he set that record of touchdowns, 23, I think it was. It's crazy. That was a lot. When Rice had that record, I think it was 23 or 22, I can't remember. But that was during a lockout year, dude. So he had less games than Randy on that one. Just a little side note. I did notice that stat that didn't bode well for Chicago or us, and it's really no surprise. I just didn't ever see it in maybe like 2 months. I hadn't seen the stat, but most average yards to go on 3rd down this season. The Vikings coming in at number 1, Aaron, 7.8. 3rd down and 7.8. Followed by it was a 3-way tie for second, Broncos, Saints, and then, of course, the opponent, Bears. But, based off that Cincinnati game, our average wasn't going to be good. Just to start with, when we had that opening drive of like 4 penalties and 1. But I knew it was bad, and I figured it would finish top 5, but I hadn't looked at it because it didn't, after a while you get sick of looking at that stat or whatever. But we closed strong, baby. We closed strong. We got the number 1, baby, the longest 3rd down and yards to go. But yeah, we were saying this before, that's the one thing about Zimmer is this team is prideful. They played their asses off this year and bounced back after, tough loss after tough loss. The old lose 2, but then come back and win 2 when you think, oh, it's going to unravel now. Oh, it's going to unravel now. And it did unravel, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't just an unraveling randomly. You could say, well, this, that, the other. I think what it was, 14 out of the 17 games, 14 were tied. We didn't beat the record, but we're tied with like 2 other teams as far as most 1-point scores and whatnot. But on the flip side, and plus Jefferson's in his 2nd year. You know what I mean? And by the way, you can tell that he is happy with what they're doing with him here. Now, every wide receiver, stop making him there's 2 things in press conferences. They're either trying to, and this happened ever since he said, throw the ball, which gets said almost every game loudly, but we didn't have a crowd so you could hear him. So they go 1 or 2 routes with JJ. They either try to make him a diva, right? Or they try to use Cousins and turn him on, I want to turn, I'm going to use my Cousins thing. And that always makes me laugh too, because wherever Jefferson would have went, he would have put up numbers. We know that. So this, I'm not saying, oh man, it's because of Kirk. I'm not saying that. But through 2 years, this stat that I'm about to talk about is targets. And that's been 30 years. I think 92 or 91 it got, that's when they started keeping track of it. So that's about 30 years. Through 2 years, he's the most targeted receiver ever. Now, don't get me wrong. In the 90s and even in the 2000s, they weren't throwing as much as we do nowadays. We even ended up 9th or 10th in attempts this year. So, I mean, we're getting him the ball. Like, a lot of people want to turn him into either this way over-the-top drama guy, or they don't like Cousins, so they're going to try to do this weird shit and try to just make up all this dumb shit off of back-to-back, not enough targets for Jefferson. And, by the way, Thielen back-to-back. I think that was like Baltimore and some other game. And we talked about that. We had long segments about that, but that was fixed after that, right? So, and it's not like, once again, Cousins like, nah, I'm just never going to throw it to him. Like he didn't want to. You know what I mean? I mean, shit, even that touchdown, that tells you they're getting on the same page, that touchdown in that game. Because he was supposed to run a different route, and that's what Cousins was waiting for. Cousins did it was like a little juke to the side and reset, and there was a good block there, by the way, I think by O'Neal. And then it was like, well, fuck, I understand why he's doing that, because the corner came off and was covering our guy Ham. It looked like a corner blitz, but it actually was the Ham right at the sticks. So he's like, fuck it, I'm going straight. Dude, I'm running this bitch post. And that tells you they're on the same page. He's like, oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay, 1-on-1. Boom, he just threw it up to him. And obviously that's where Jefferson came in and played those dead hands for a while. And then at the last second, popped it up, much like a Carter or Randy Moss in that way, that's for sure. But long story short, it is what it is. Any other items? Oh, Patterson. Pat P. Now, this guy didn't get many targets this year, right? And I didn't even think about it. I was like, hey, he doesn't have a pick. And I've been listening to, his podcast every week with his cousin, and he brought that up, and I was like, oh, shit, Aaron. He doesn't have a pick. Like, he's made some nice plays, but he doesn't have a pick. He's barely gotten much action. And, of course, we have a little Breland to thank for that, but he didn't get much action. But I absolutely, in a meaningless game that we were going to win, well, it's not meaningless because if we would have lost, we would have had a higher pick. But if it was going to happen, right, we can't control it. It was happening right in front of our face. But that was pretty dope for him to get not only his pick, because that would have been the first year in 11 years that he's never got an interception. And to do it in style, like LSU cornerbacks do, that was pretty nice too. That was pretty nice that he got a pick six.
Yeah, it was. And you're right. He just hadn't been targeted thanks to Breland and a little bit to Dantzler and all the mess. Maybe Chris Boyd's in on that as well.
And him.
There are better guys
Sure,
there's better guys to throw at than Pat Peterson. So I it's sad now that he's on a 1-year deal. To me, it's like, oh man, I could get a 3-year out of that guy. But I think he played as well as we thought he'd play, maybe even a little bit better. And I think he was kind of a grounding force for the defense, for whatever that was worth for this year's defense. But yeah, it was nice to see him kind of go out in style. And if this is his last play or his last game as a Viking, it's a good way to go out. And it's just sad to see him go, especially when you're talking about LSU cornerbacks. There's a damn good one coming up in this draft. And, be nice to get another one, but, yeah, let's hope they work it out and he's back next season. It's just, it's a 50-50 shot at this point, but good to see a pick six, and we kind of waited for it all season. It's too bad we couldn't get it in the middle of the season, but it's good to see, for him and for the squad that, he got that play, and it wasn't an easy run back. I mean, he had to have some vision on him, but when he broke free on it, you're like, oh, okay. Hit the end zone. So yeah, good to see that. And for whatever it's worth, it was nice to have Pat P for this season.
Mm-hmm. And Tomlinson, the last month or so, he's really come on. We finally got to see, Pierce in the game, but also Anthony Barr, who more than likely won't be back next year. Well, he's a free agent. We're gonna pay him about $9 a little under $10 million regardless, but you never know. If he went to a 3-4, maybe he'd come back. You never know, but I doubt it. But either way, he had a damn good game to close as well. Had 2 sacks. Hey, Aaron, we were bringing him off the edge. I can't believe he can actually apply pressure and literally get blocked and fall on the ground, get up, and still get to the quarterback. Huh, weird.
Yeah, his last game, possibly last game as a Viking, he comes off the edge. Every season it's like, we're going to see Barr coming off the edge this year, so that'll be good. And this never, ever happens. Finally, we get to see it. And he's somewhat successful at it. I mean, I could see him, with him and Kendricks being friends and Hunter and those guys, I could see them all being back. Just have to work some things around. I mean, it's another player that you just go, okay, well, what does he have to offer? But then, this season he did show a little bit of different things. I think Mike used him in a lot of different ways that we had been waiting for him to do. But, he's also the sort of captain of the defense, so he's kind of stuck in his spot there. And, I don't know what's going to happen to him. I wouldn't be upset. Chris would be upset if he was back on the roster next year. I'd be like, okay, cool. Maybe we can find some creative things to do with him. But his body's breaking down a little bit. He's getting a little bit older, but I wish him well, whatever he does. But I think I'd like to see him back next year.
Yeah, I don't see him back, but no, as long as the number, I don't think he'd come back for a big number anyway. But for us anyway, But just because of the injury prone thing lately. But I wouldn't be. Yeah, no, I wouldn't be. What the hell are we doing? This is a retread or whatever. I wouldn't be saying that either. I agree. And maybe, we can bring him off the edge. We're probably, we need an edge anyway. You can't have DJ doing everything on the right side, right? Let's bring Barr off the edge. That would be fun. Because that first year and a half, I think it was, no pun intended, but the bar he set in the first 2 years was just like, this dude is a destructive force, like he cannot be stopped, and then it was like, but we want him to have more responsibility and we'll use him different ways. And you won't be able to see it in his stats. You won't be able to see this and that, but he's going to be effective. Really, it's just been staying on the field. He's very effective when he plays, but that has been an issue, no doubt about it. And he's come around, like the knee thing randomly. It looked like he was healthy. Then he had to clean it up. He missed like 6 weeks or whatever. And, I am with you, though. I would assume it'd be a manageable number for just 1 year or something like that, or 2 years. I'd be happy if he came back. But, yeah, I just don't see him coming back.
Quickly to dovetail off that, Chris, yesterday, the game I saw defensively, I saw some guys really playing well. Willikis looked really, really good. So did Lynch in the middle, and Jones and Wanham. They all played.
Tomlinson was getting in their ass, dude.
Yeah, I thought defensive line started to see, guys that we hadn't seen necessarily splash before, kind of making their way up the roster. And I was impressed with Willikis, and I was impressed with Wanham, and I was impressed with Jones and these guys that you just were in Zimmer's second squad forever and just couldn't break through. And for some reason they got in the game, and I was rather impressed with them. So I think it bodes well for whatever happens coming. But I just think there's talent there, man, and so
we got depth there, dude. All we need is
nice,
Pearson Hunter to be healthy, man. We got talent on the defense.
Yeah. It's a nice little situation for whoever takes this coaching job, and I just I think it's the best job out there personally.
Yeah, it's definitely up there, man. Because you're right. As we know, both lines are so major, and to have that much talent there, and a lot of it under contract for at least a year or two. We've already talked about how we'll probably have to make a decision after next year or the year after with Tomlinson and Pierce. Well, Watts is like, hey, I'll be part of that decision making, So yeah, man, it's really just about Pierce and Hunter being healthy, dude. It's a different defense, a different line. And then that depth can really shine too, because we don't have to play all those guys as much sometimes as we had in the last 2 years. But hey, it may help long term because, like you said, we have seen these guys come on. Wandham, sure, Griff was out playing them through the first half of the season, but once Griff went, it almost inspired him or something, because this last half of the year, DJ has been damn good, dude. And it's not just the 3 sacks, So obviously, when you're young and dumb, sometimes you don't hold the edge in the run or whatever, and we get that part. You want to do your fancy spin moves and stuff like that to get to the quarterback or whatever, or, you're still, not 100% alert of what they're trying to do in that moment, and they can make it look like it, and all of a sudden it's a screenplay and it's on your side, or a rush, they pop it outside. We saw a lot of that, but yeah, there's a lot to build on, no doubt about it. So next week we will be transitioning to the Timberwolves Gophers basketball podcast, Living in Loserville. We kind of get, oh, I love that name, and they laugh, or, oh, dude, why are you so negative? And we're not negative people. Yeah, we're skeptics and we're realistic, but we're not over the top negative the whole time. Let's just look how we just talked about the Vikings roster back-to-back years not making the playoffs. So we will be transitioning into that. Speaking of transition, the Timberwolves, they have the most transition points in the NBA right now. So yeah, it's going to be fun. We'll see if it's going to be win some, lose some with the Gophers. But right now, the Timberwolves, if they can remain, knock on wood, healthy, they got a nice little push here down the stretch, January, February, March, and into April. Let's at least make the play-in, if not a little higher. But I'm definitely excited to transition into that. Any last words before we get out of here, sir?
No, I mean, just let's, I appreciate the work that Spielman has done. I'm going to miss the predictability of the 7th round picks and the trading back, to pick up more of those 7th round picks, maybe throw in a few 4ths and 5ths. And
the cornerbacks too,
Got to get the cornerbacks. And obviously Zimmer, and the defense. I think maybe he has to go back to the drawing board, and I think the league is probably caught up with his defense, unfortunately. Yeah. So I think, he's bright enough to come up with something. Let's see where he lands, or if he lands anywhere at all, maybe he's just going to chill at the ranch. But, I was a Zimmer fan. I'll be a Zimmer fan going forward, and thought he did a good job. And Spielman did a good job for what it's worth. I think that he just kind of got a little bit too familiar with some guys, and I guess that's a terrible way to say that. He got a little too stuck on bringing some guys back and keeping guys longer than they should have, and so on. Should have
blocked the Baltimore numbers.
Yeah. Yannick Ngakoue might not have been worth a 2nd round pick, that type of thing, but. When you got so many picks, what's a 2nd round
exactly. His best round too.
Yeah. So yeah, it was good years with those guys, but I am looking forward to see what comes in the future, and let's just hope they make some good decisions and we get this thing rolling for next season, because we're probably gonna have to do some emergency shows in the off season, Chris, with the hires and the new stuff. So we'll look forward to what's coming up next. And that's also looking forward to a damn good Timberwolves team coming around the corner. And the Gophers aren't even half as bad as we thought they were going to be. They're actually watchable. So this will be a fun living in Loserville year this year.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I agree with you on both those. I mean, just looking at this roster, Spielman's not a bum like a lot of people are saying it. And, part of the people, catching up to Zimmer is because they copycatted him, I mean, a bunch of defenses do what he does now. So, yeah, you're right. I do think there's some tweaks and whatnot. But, once again, if you look at the pressures and sacks this year, was it, consistent? No. We didn't have those 7 sack games like we've had in the past. But we're still getting pressure on that QB and hits. So, we'll see you next Monday. Go Timberwolves. Go Gophers. We'll be back living in Loserville. Peace.